Hello and welcome. We are now 1 minute past, and so we will get started. So welcome, thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today for Secure Remote Working hosted by HeliCloud and Sentry Bay. Today's webinar addresses the tools, the expertise and processes required to deliver secure remote working in your organization using AWS Workspaces and Sentry Bay armoredclient. We have two presenters for you today, and firstly we will hear from Carlos Miguens, Senior Cloud Consultant at HeliCloud, followed by Chris Evans, Chief Revenue Officer at Sentry Bay. Throughout the webinar, your audio will be muted, and so we do encourage you to please use the chat box and the Q&A board to pose your questions. Please do type your questions as they occur throughout the presentation, and Carlos and Chris will be making time to review, to answer, and to discuss all of the questions that have been posed at the end. Our webinar is being recorded today, and that's so that we can make it available for you and share it with you together with the slides at the end of the day. And we will be keeping a real strict time on these presentations. The presentation delivery will take around 25 minutes, and that's to ensure that we have got the time to answer your all important questions. And so we do welcome you to share your thoughts throughout. I'll now mute myself and pass to Carlos to begin. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. As organizations have moved to the cloud over the last few years, there's also been a trend to remote working. This has been challenging for many. Sourcing the required devices, setting them up, enabling the necessary secure connections, and scaling up back-end hardware to support a large remote population has proved complex, as well as a challenging and costly enterprise. Through this talk, we'll be taking a step back and looking at these challenges in more detail. We'll also look at the advantages of remote working. Finally, we'll look at some of the technologies available to enable remote working quickly, cost-effectively, and securely. Remote working is a vast subject area, and if you're planning on transforming the way you work, you need to underpin this with a complete remote working transformation program for your organization. We are planning a session on improving remote team working called Virtual Power Teams with Peter Ivanov, so keep an eye open for that announcement. However, that's outside the scope of this session and will take way more time than we have allocated. Not only is remote working a vast area, it's also growing rapidly. There are many drivers for remote working, with the most recent being the lockdown imposed by the coronavirus. But even before this unprecedented challenge, there were some compelling reasons for moving to home working, with many companies enticing new employees with attractive packages that include some working from home. The benefits to employees are obvious, but the move to remote working also has advantages for the organization. Among them, cost savings, improved employee morale, and the environmental factor, as you can see from the statistics presented here. There is a wealth of supporting information on remote working, which, as you can see here, has been growing quickly over the past 10 years. The recent global pandemic with the ensuing lockdown has only accelerated the move. Kate Lister, the President of Global Workplace Analytics, predicts that 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home multiple days of the week by the end of 2021. But the move to remote working also poses some challenges to both employee and employer. For example, employees find it lonely and more difficult to unplug after work, with some also finding that collaborating and communicating remotely is an issue. For employers, there is the need to address the well-being of their employees, but there are also technical challenges of providing remote working facilities. These are the challenges that we'll focus on now. The most obvious challenge is providing the remote worker with the necessary hardware. For small organizations, this may not prove too much of a challenge, but for larger organizations where you have a workforce in the hundreds or thousands, this can become quite a costly burden in itself. Not only do you have to acquire the hardware through a capital expense exercise, but you also need to consider the refreshing of the hardware over time. More recently, global supply chain problems have meant that sourcing hardware has not even been possible. In many cases, the work laptop can be older and less powerful than the computer people have as a personal device. Having a lot of remote desktops also leads to support requirement, not only for the hardware itself, but for the setup and updates of the operating system and software. This approach does, of course, give you almost complete control over the environment, allowing you to have a platform which is consistent and the same security software installed on all the devices, for example. In all, this approach to remote working leads to a significant overhead in the remote management of the hardware and software estate. Consequently, some organizations have adopted a BYOD, or bring your own device approach. With this, the remote worker uses their existing platform, whatever that might be, and connects to the corporate network, typically through a VPN or virtual private network. Immediately, you can start to think of bad things that can happen here, with the company systems being exposed to all sorts of security threats and malicious activity, inadvertently or not. You have no control over the software installed or the actions that the employee takes on their own laptop. For instance, it's easy for them to use a USB to download sensitive data, and often as easy to introduce a malware or a virus to your systems in the same way. Because of this, companies typically have well-defined processes for the use of bring your own device. This has led to a number of mobile device management or MDM companies springing up to support this way of working. Companies such as AirWatch. Whilst existing companies such as Microsoft and Cisco have added MDM to their portfolios. MDM does have drawbacks, however. It's costly, either in the cloud or on-premise, and needs yet another set of skills in IT to create the policies and administer the system. Companies may also have investments in current laptop and desktop architecture that prevent them from committing to an MDM system. There are also a range of other security issues and technical limitations which can cause MDM systems to be less secure than your own systems. But what if you could have the best of both? This is where the notion of virtual desktops comes into play. Virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI, is a software technology that separates the desktop environment and the associated application software from the physical client device that's used to access it. So the user's desktop operating system, instead of running on their device, runs instead on a centralized infrastructure. This type of approach has been around for over 10 years and was popularized by companies such as VMware and Citrix. These systems can be used on your own device, but they still remain expensive and difficult to administer. Furthermore, they typically require hefty back-end servers to support the user population. This infrastructure has to be sized to support the total user population and may max out at times, providing poor performance while remaining heavily underutilized at other times. What is required is a VDI implementation which can scale and be acquired as an operating expense rather than capital expenditure, allowing you to scale the performance to as many users as required and only pay for what you need. This is where Desktop as a Service comes into play. Desktop as a Service is VDI, but hosted in the cloud. With VDI, as we've just seen, an organization deploys virtual desktops from its own on-premise data centers. In-house IT teams are responsible for deploying the virtual desktops, as well as purchasing, managing, and upgrading the infrastructure. Desktop as a Service provides the same functionality, but the infrastructure is cloud-based. AWS calls this Desktop as a Service Workspaces. This is a managed service with which you can provision either Windows or Linux desktops in just a few minutes, and quickly scale to provide thousands of desktops to workers across the globe. Because this is a managed service, it eliminates the complexity in managing hardware inventory, operating system versions, and patches, and virtual desktop infrastructure, which helps simplify your desktop delivery strategy. The system scales elastically, so you pay only for the users you need, and those users get a fast, responsive desktop of their choice that they can access anywhere, anytime, and from any supported device. Workspaces conveys four major benefits. It simplifies your desktop delivery, it reduces costs, and makes that cost an OpEx cost. It also allows you to centrally manage your desktop deployment and scale it easily. And last but not least, it keeps your data secure. Let's look at simplification first. Amazon Workspaces helps you eliminate many administrative tasks associated with managing your desktop lifecycle, including provisioning, deploying, maintaining, and recycling desktops. These tasks can be carried out through the AWS console and indeed through APIs, allowing you to manage your estate as code. There is less hardware inventory to manage and no need for complex virtual desktop infrastructure deployments that don't scale. Let's look at simplification first. Amazon Workspaces helps you eliminate many administrative tasks associated with managing your desktop lifecycle, including provisioning, deploying, maintaining, and recycling desktops. These tasks can be carried out through the AWS console and through APIs, allowing you to manage your estate as code. There is less hardware inventory to manage and no need for complex virtual desktop infrastructure deployments that don't scale. Consequently, you need less skilled individuals to manage the same number of desktops. And Workspaces eliminates the need to overbuy desktop and laptop resources by providing on-demand access to cloud desktops that include a range of compute, memory, and storage resources to meet your users' performance needs. It also reduces costs. You have the flexibility of deciding on how workspaces are provisioned for the best elasticity and performance, and you never need to worry about running out of resources. Because you can manage a global deployment of many thousands of workspaces from the AWS console, you can rapidly provision and deprovision desktops as the needs of your workforce change. And since Amazon Workspaces is available in 13 regions, you can give access to high-performance cloud desktops wherever your teams get work done. In order to ensure a secure environment, Amazon Workspaces is deployed within an Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC. Workspaces must have a connection to an Active Directory. This can be easily joined to your own AD, either on-premise or in the cloud, or as shown here as an AWS service. This is the default when you are using a quick start option, with each user being added to that directory as you add their workspace. Best practice dictates that you should still be using a well-architected landing zone to deploy workspaces, and they should have their own account in the landing zone. Although not shown here, Workspaces runs across multiple availability zones. As an administrator, you can change the configuration of a workspace, for instance, to add more disk space or memory. But you can also devolve this ability to some users so that they can change their own configurations. In this short demonstration, we are going to use the AWS console to create and launch a workspace. I use the AWS console because it's much easier to show what's happening. But normally this would be done through code, using infrastructure as code. Once we've created the workspace, we'll go to Client Machine and log in to the workspace, fire up the browser so you can see the virtual desktop in action. When I click on Launch Workspaces, the first choice I have to make is the Active Directory I want to use. Remember that workspaces must be linked to an Active Directory. Most of the time you will already have an Active Directory set up and will have made it available for workspaces, in which case it would show up here. I'm just using the Active Directory service on AWS for this demonstration. Having chosen the Active Directory, the next step is to choose the user for the workspace I'm creating. I could choose multiple users and hence create multiple workspaces at the same time. Whilst I have the ability to choose existing users, because I'm using a default Active Directory setup in AWS, I can also add users, and so I'm going to add Matt Black as a user. The next step is to choose a bundle for the workspace. A bundle is the combination of a machine image, holding the operating systems, applications, and local configuration, and the compute configuration, CPU, memory, storage, and so on. Bundles give you greater flexibility in the workspaces that you can create. In this case, I'm using one of the standard bundles already created for me by AWS. Now I can configure the workspaces that I'm creating. The running mode is important, as this will determine if you are paying by the hour or billed monthly. Which one you choose depends on the use that the workspace is going to get. The economics threshold varies by bundle type, but the cutover is around 80 hours of use. The bundle I've chosen here would cost me $42 a month in the London region should I choose to have it always running. I'm going to make sure that I encrypt the root and user volumes. If I use infrastructure as code, then this would of course be part of the process and would not be a choice I have to make. I can now review and launch my workspace. I will have to wait while the workspace is built. This can take up to 20 minutes and is a one-off process which happens at the beginning and every time you rebuild the workspace from a new image. Once my workspace is launched, I can take a look at the details. By now, the user will have been sent an email with details about what they have to do to access the workspace. So let's take a look at that. The user receives an email with the necessary information to be able to download a client, start their workspace and log in. When they click the link, they are prompted to set their workspace credentials. If you had chosen an existing user, this step would be skipped. I'm then taken to the download for the client app. In my case, I've already got the application downloaded, so I can go straight to it and start it up. I have to log in, and then once I'm done, I'll get access to my workspace. In this case, the workspace is already running, so it starts up quickly. If my workspace had been hibernating, then I could expect it to take some 90 seconds or so to start. Once in, I have access to any applications that have been provisioned for me. In this bundle, I only have access to Firefox and the Windows installed applications. But as you can see, I can use Firefox, and I have access to the internet and the standard Windows applications, where I can also shut down my workspace. The title of our talk was Secure Remote Working, and so we really need to talk about why this is secure. Each user is provided with access to persistent encrypted storage volumes in the AWS cloud, with no user data stored on the local device. This helps improve the security of user data and reduces your overall risk surface area. The end-to-end protocol is also encrypted, avoiding you having to use an underlying VPN infrastructure. AWS also ensures that Workspace complies with a number of industry standards, such as Level 1 PCI DSS, ISO 27001, and SOC 1 to 3 for the finance industry. However, here at HeliCloud, we understand just how important security is, and we recognize that even all of these features leave a small attack vector. Copy and paste to the local device and key logging, for instance. This is why we have teamed up with Sentry to offer their armored client within the context of Amazon Workspaces.
Welcome to the Sentry webinar focused on secure remote working. Whether it's organised cyber criminals for whom the current health crisis has just broadened their attack landscape, or opportunistic hackers with time on their hands, there's no doubting the rise in cyber attacks. Every day we're seeing reports of phishing and hacking attempts which have grown with the enforcement of remote working. Despite every kind deed we witnessed during this period, the world is full of people with malintent, and we are inadvertently opening the back door and inviting them in. The main issue is that the workforce, by setting up at home, have moved away from the security blanket of the workplace. In many cases, employees are relying on personal laptops, home computers, possibly share computers, and even mobile phones to connect with their corporate networks. These endpoints are notoriously vulnerable, with 70% of breaches originating at the endpoint and as many as 42% being unprotected at any given time. With so many people using compromised devices, a weak link in the security chain is being prized open, and this could cause potentially devastating damage to businesses at what is already a very, very testing time. Of course, it is difficult to check for the security deficiencies of these home devices. Most enterprises will have little or no control over what software is running on the end device or what programs have previously been executed. And the manic rush to set up from home and protect the health of workers has left them with limited options for checking and addressing any deficiencies. Some will of course be using antivirus or internet security software, but for employers there's no way of knowing whether it's up to date or indeed sufficient to protect them, particularly when they are logging into the corporate network. For this reason, during the course of the coronavirus crisis, we believe that the cyber attacks on endpoints will rise by between 30 and 40%. One particular danger is phishing attacks. Researchers have reported that hundreds of thousands of spear phishing attacks have been launched. These include emails from bogus delivery companies offering an update on how coronavirus is impacting its operations, through to scammers posing as representatives of the WHO, asking the victim to click on a link or an attachment. Of course, if the attachment is opened, malware, including the particular phishing attack some are mentioned here, can be installed, which gives the attackers the opportunity then to steal the personal data, but also gain a backdoor into the corporate network. Another problem is with ransomware. This particular ransomware mentioned here tried to exploit a vulnerability with a particular VPN, which despite being patched quickly was not fast enough to stop people being targeted. VPNs are increasingly being used by enterprises to stop the corporate network from being exposed to the public internet. But of course, any chink in the armor that allows malicious code to bypass the security controls is dangerous. So how are we going to manage all this onslaught? Here at Sentry Bay, we have a very diverse range of unique solutions that can ward off all of these threats. We specifically design and deploy security software that's installed and operates proactively on your end device. The Sentry Bay mission is to protect all data at the point of entry into your selected applications, irrespective of the undetected threats on your end user device, particularly when you're using remote access applications, VDI access, VPNs, web browsers, Microsoft Office, you name it, etc. I'd now like to introduce you to our flagship enterprise solution we call the Sentry Bay ARmoredClient. It's a simple 3-click one-time download to the end user device. Once installed, the kernel level drivers intercept your keystrokes made by the user, even through virtual keyboards. That is, we grab your data first before anyone else does, and we simply obfuscate these entries and feed any keylogging malware that's there unusable information, i.e. scrambled data, whilst ensuring that the protected applications receive the valid data inputs. We're effectively the gatekeeper for data input, deciding what should receive those keystrokes against what should be fed nonsense. We also provide anti-screen capture technology, which prevents undetected malware grabbing your information presented on the screen. Now let's demonstrate the Sentry Bay ARmoredClient providing real-time data protection when accessing AWS Workspaces. Here we're illustrating a typical user typing away in their sensitive document, and it illustrates how undetected keylogging malware, if you could see it that is, will harvest everything you type whilst working in your VDI session and feed this off to their server somewhere. Keylogging is still the #1 favoured tool by hackers for stealing data. Screen capture malware is also another favoured tool, where the undetected malware continuously takes screenshots of your screen and steals the data that way. The Sentry Bay ARmoredClient is a simple one-off 3-click download and will operate transparently in the background with no effect on the normal use. Here we're also showing a visual data scrambler situated within the protected application, thereby confirming real-time protection is indeed in place and gives that visual confirmation to the end user. In this scenario, real-time protection has been configured for all data being entered into Amazon Workspaces, irrespective of the undetected threats present. So let's now open up our secret document again, and as we now type, the Sentry ARmoredClient will obfuscate the data and feed scrambled data to the undetected keylogin malware, rendering it useless. It will also provide blanked out screens to all screen capture malware that may be present. All of these technologies are then combined with what we call our secure framework, where we isolate the protected applications that we want to protect by running them under a one-time user account. This will protect them from non-system privileged malware, as well as employing anti-injection, anti-tampering measures, etc. So summing up, we've been working very closely with HeliCloud to provide the benefits I've just mentioned, focused on purely protecting the end user when accessing Amazon Workspaces. Thank you for listening, and do not hesitate to contact us for more information. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Chris.
So we are at the moment putting out an offer until the end of May. If you are interested in secure remote working, then we're offering some free workshops for discovery planning, design, and then the use of AWS Workspaces and armoredclient for 4 weeks after that. And we will run a proof of concept for 2 types of team members. So you could have a power user and potentially a simple user, and we'll run an implementation for up to 50 of your team members with full management of the infrastructure and the VDI from HeliCloud. So if you are interested in that, then please do get in contact, and we'll be happy to have you on that.
Thank you. And so just to wrap and conclude today's webinar, thank you, Carlos and Chris, for answering the questions. We will make sure that all of the attendees do have your email addresses for follow-up. And if in the meantime you did want to join us on other events that we have running across various topics in the next few weeks, then we would be delighted to welcome you. Next week, we have a GitOps event, which is really talking around leveraging GitOps to improve your operational efficiencies with AWS. And then following that, on the 27th of May, something that's quite exciting, not anything we've ever done before, but we're actually looking at virtual power teams from the people perspective. So that's the techniques and the methodologies for sustaining employee engagements, and making sure that you're still able to motivate and engage your staff to deliver a great performance and great results. All the details of future events will be sent in the next few days. And like I said, we'll be delighted for you to join us. The slides and the audios are going to be made available. And in the meantime, on your control panel, you will find in a handout section a PDF for you to download and take away immediately. As this webinar concludes, there will be a very short, a quick 5-question easy click survey that will appear, and we'd be delighted to hear your feedback. And so it just concludes for me to say my thanks to Chris and to Carlos for presenting, and thanks for joining us and listening in. We hope to see you soon. Stay safe. Thank you.